I'm working on a video right now, how good is Albion for solo players in 2023? And for that video, I wanted to get a better sense of what the new player experience is like for Albion Online. Particularly for money making, as SBI has consistently nerfed the rewards for most activities over the last couple of years. So this video is going to present my findings from some of the research I did into new player activities and about how much money players make from doing them. But before that, a quick word from our sponsor, ExpressVPN. Using the internet in 2023 without using a VPN is like leaving the house without wearing any pants. Sure, you might be able to get away with it for a little while, but sooner or later someone's going to notice and things are going to get awkward. With ExpressVPN, you can protect your online privacy so you don't have to worry about exposing more than you intended to the digital world. ExpressVPN takes 100% of your internet traffic and reroutes it through its own secure servers, making it virtually impossible for anyone to track your online activity. With ExpressVPN, you can rest easy knowing that your private information and browsing data is safe from hackers, cyber criminals, your government, big tech, and even your own ISP. Or you can even use it to do things like watch shows that aren't available in your country. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description to get the first 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. So before we look at all these activities that I looked at individually, let's just go over how I got to the numbers that I got to. So for all of these activities, I basically just went out and did them for at least a couple hours, usually on a more new account and not on my main, but it kind of depended on the activity. So really simply, I basically did them for a couple hours and tracked how much money I was getting per hour. I also did some research looking at other YouTube videos of people that have done tracked rewards of certain activities and tried to look for some other data to supplement this. There honestly wasn't that much out there, but for stuff like solo dungeons and corrupted dungeons, I was able to find some stuff to get me a better estimate. Combining the rewards that I earned compared to the rewards that other people were getting and reporting when I researched it, I came up with a general estimate of probably the top end of how much I'd imagine a solo beginner player to be able to get in those activities. So it's important to note here that these are very generous estimates. The average new player will probably not hit these numbers. Rather, these numbers are the most I would imagine a new player hitting with these activities. Also, just a quick note on the background clips that you will see in this video. A lot of them are not from when I was testing these activities. I did this quite a while ago, and so I either lost some of the background clips or forgot to record them. So don't look too much into the background clips of what I'm doing there. Okay, so starting us off with low-end solo dungeons. So I tested these yellow zone solo dungeons, safe zone, tier 5 solo dungeons, no maps. I did some flat 5 maps, but mostly just random tier 5 solo dungeons I found lying around. And it's a little bit hard to give an estimate for these. So when I was testing them, I did them in tier 5 equivalent gear on a basically new account. It's on the Big Lips McMoney account. It has a little bit of spec, but not that much. But I did use quite an efficient clearing build with the one hit of nature. So a new player who doesn't have hundreds of hours of experience doing solo dungeons efficiently would probably hit under what I was hitting, but at the same time, it's really not that hard to get better gear than tier 5 equivalent, so many new players could clear these dungeons with a lot higher IP than I was clearing, and therefore do them as fast or maybe even faster. So this is a pretty rough estimate, but I was getting around 100k average silver per hour, and it seems like that was about in line with some of the other people that I saw doing these dungeons. You could definitely make much more money than that if you invested in a really good set, an efficient clearing set, really high IP. You could speed run them really fast, but for beginners, that's not really a thing, so we're gonna just say 100k an hour. Next on the list was also solo dungeons, except this time high-end solo dungeons, so tier 7 and 8 solo dungeon maps out in the black zone is what I tested these on. Again, I tested them on a pretty new account, very low spec, but a very efficient clearing build, and I used either tier 6 or tier 7 equivalent gear. Unfortunately, while I've done a ton of these and documented a ton of rewards for these in the past, their rewards are constantly changing, so it's really hard to find some good data. But my best estimate for a new player is that the top end of what they would receive would be around 400k silver per hour, so 4 times as much as the ones in the safe zones, which kind of makes sense. Next was gathering, a classic activity that a lot of new players focus on. This is another one that's extremely hard to give a good estimate for because there's so many variables involved. What type of resource are they gathering? How long have you been gathering for? How many resources are you gathering at once? All that sort of stuff. But no matter what, for beginners, early game gathering is not that great for money, so a very high-end estimate for this would be around 100k silver per hour. Next on the list was soloing the Avalonian Roads, the green chests in the Avalonian Roads, and this isn't the most accessible thing to new players as the green chests can be a little bit difficult, but it is possible for new players, especially with specific builds, so I thought I'd include it anyways. The top end estimate I can give for this is around 300k silver per hour, although I would highly expect vast majority of beginners to get quite below that, as again, this is a quite difficult activity, so if you're not like familiar with the combat style of Albion, you haven't played similar games, you might struggle a little bit more. Most of the reward in the mists comes from the full loot PvP, but I didn't want to include any full loot PvP in the money estimations for this, as it's really hard to get an estimate. It's very much based on player skill, and it's not something that's super good for new players. So this is just looking at the PvE in the mists. If you go into the lethal mists, not the non-lethal ones, but the lethal mists, and you just focus on doing the mob camps and maybe the spiders and stuff if you see them. So the money in this comes in the might and or more favor that you get from doing it, and it seems like on the top end, a newer player would be getting around 200k silver per hour. Arenas are a very classic new player activity. Always suggest them for new players. They're very good to help learn PvP and stuff, but the rewards are not that big, especially in the silver department, and so you're going to be looking at an average around 40k silver per hour if you're doing arenas. This is assuming a pretty standard queue time of 2 to 10 minutes and an average win percentage of 50%. And of course, not having a very high rank, so the rewards from the bags that you get aren't particularly good. Next is open world fame farming or mob killing. Again, this was tested in the black zones and the red zones. I didn't test this at all in the safe zones like blue and yellow, but I could imagine the ratio of reward to zone would be similar to solo dungeons, so the estimated money per hour for black zone and red zone open world fame farming was around 400k per hour. I can imagine the safe zone would be 100k per hour, but I haven't tested that. And again, this 400k is a pretty high-end estimate, as I was using a pretty efficient build to test this. Bandit Assault is another thing I'd always suggest for new players to get into, as it is a very, very good way to make money, a very easy way to make money. And this one, again, is going to vary a lot because it kind of depends on how your faction does, if you rat any really good gear, if you die early on. There's a lot of factors, but it looks like on average, at least for top end, assuming you don't get any too crazy loot from other players, is around 400k silver per hour in faction points. I also went and farmed arcane essences at these little ghost towns, or that's what I call them. Arcane essence are a very classic old school way of making money for new players. There's lots of guides and stuff that suggest new players to go out and farm arcane essence, so I always see them doing it, so I thought I should include this on the list. And from my estimates, it seems like at the top end, you'd be receiving around 200k silver per hour for doing this. Last but not least, 4 activities that I checked out were Hunter Corrupted Dungeons. Now again, like many others on this list, the amount of money you'd be receiving from these is highly dependent on the situation, mostly how well you do at the PvP aspects. If you get into a fight, how often are you going to be winning them? But luckily for this, I was able to find a couple other people who had reported statistics on their Hunter Corrupted Dungeons and combine them with my own. It seems like you'd be looking at around 300k silver per hour at the top end. Okay, so looking at all those numbers together, what does this mean for the new player experience? If you're here looking to make money as a newer player, what should you be focusing on? Well, let's start with that. So obviously the lethal zone activities are going to give you more money per hour than the safe zone activities. However, there is one standout. If you're specifically looking for safe zone activities as a more beginner player, it seems like Hunter Corrupted Dungeons are probably your best bet to make the most amount of money per hour. Now, obviously this is highly variable, as I discussed during it, as if you're really bad at PvP, you're going to die a lot, you're not going to make as much money, but the more you do them, the higher infamy you get, the better loot you get from it, and you also get better at PvP and probably die less. Another good one to note is the Bandit Assault. It ties many of the other activities for about the best money per hour that you could expect, and it's a super easy activity to get into. Unfortunately, it's only available for random 1 hour periods during the day, so if you're a new player, definitely keep your eye out for Bandit Assaults and try to get involved as much as possible. Other than that, the best money you're going to make is just getting familiar with going into the Black Zone and doing some of these more dangerous open world mob farms or solo dungeons deep in that Black Zone. In terms of what this all means and what these numbers mean for how good the new player experience is, especially when it comes to making money for something like premium, well, how good something is sort of subjective, so let me give you an objective number. If you were to just cycle through all of these 10 activities 1 hour at a time, so you just did them all an equal amount of time, it would take you to pay 18 million silver for premium. It would take you around 73 hours of gameplay to make that money. If you wanted to make your premium money in the first 30 days of playing, that means it would be around 2.5 hours on average of playtime doing these activities if you wanted to make it in 30 days. On the other hand, if you focus just on the best money-making activities on this list, a lot of the best ones were tied for 400k per hour, which would put you at 45 hours to make the 18 million silver for premium, or around 1.5 hours per day on average. And again, just remember these are the high-end estimates, so the average new player would likely take considerably longer than these times. On this note, you may have seen me post a bit of a survey asking new players how much time they had in game versus how much net worth they had, and this chart is the result of everyone that responded with under 200 hours of game time and under 18 million silver made. The y-axis here is money made per hour in thousands. So you can see that new players make around 50 to 100k silver per hour, probably on average, in their first 200 hours played. Now note that this is raw time played, so including all the time on the tutorial and just starting to learn the game, time spent sitting around, AFK, etc., all that time is included in these hours. But in general, we can get a sense of how many in-game hours it typically takes new players to get to 18 mil or their first premium payment. For these responses that I recorded, the average money per hour that was made was 69,000 silver, meaning it would take about 260 hours to reach that 18 mil for the first premium payment. So basically, all of these numbers that I've given you taken together, your first 18 million silver or your first premium payment as a new player is most likely going to take over 100 hours of gameplay. In most cases, even more than that. Now that's not saying you couldn't get it faster. Even with the methods that I tested, there are faster ways of getting premium like transport runs. But just naturally for the new player experience, someone who's actively playing the game, trying things out, progressing their account, we're looking at a minimum of 100 hours of gameplay. More realistically, for most players, I would say it's hard to guess, but maybe 150, 200 hours on average. Is that good? Is that bad? What do I think of that? Well, for a more detailed look at my thoughts, make sure to be on the lookout for the How Good is Albion for Solo Players in 2023 video, but in short, that's kind of crazy. It's too hard for new players to make money. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little video, helpful or interesting. Make sure to go to that link in the description and get your ExpressVPN 3 months for free, and I will see you next time.